This is the Neoliberal Round Podcast.
Hi, Eddie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. Let me pause the recording now. Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round Podcast. I'm Renaldo McKenzie, your host and creator. And as promised, I have with us an amazing gentleman who his people reached out to me, and I was so excited when they did because there's so much happening in America, and there's so much that I want to cover with him and go over. I actually have my talking points just now, which I just lost. Give me a second, please. America, they say, is a house divided, but maybe, just maybe, that's the house where the truest conversation happens. Today, we are joined by Eddie Bryce, speaker, host, and believer, whose mission is to bring people together using biblical principles in a time when even the word principle feels partisan. We want to understand who Eddie Bryce really is. Not the caricature some paint, but the person, the purpose, and the passion. Because if we are to heal as a nation, we must begin by listening even when it is uncomfortable. And so we're happy to have Eddie Bryce with us. And we actually have several segments. The first segment is the man behind the mic. The second one, bridging a divided nation. The third, faith, politics, and perspective. Fourth, we want to talk about hope and humanity. And of course, we're going to have closing reflections. We may not be able to do all of that. By the way, Eddie, when I told some of my friends that I'm going to have you on the show, they were saying, "What?" And I said, "You're from Turning Point." They were like, "What? Why do you have that redneck guy coming on the show? Why you have somebody like?" And I'm like, "Okay, now I know exactly where I'm going to begin." Okay, who is Eddie? And let's start. Yeah, this about this. How are you? Welcome to the show. And who are you?
Thank you. Yeah, my first name's Bryce, my last name's Eddie, which messes everybody up.
Oh, what's
But
the name?
yeah, I mean, I've been. My first name's Bryce, my last name is Eddie. Which
Oh, Josh.
when you have two first names, it screws everybody up.
I am so sorry, and I wrote it like that
No, no,
earlier, and I thought I made a mistake. Yes.
no. You are good, and I answer either way, so it doesn't matter.
So, who are you? What
Um,
shaped you, and what keeps you grounded in your mission? Who are you, really? Yes.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, I'm like everybody else trying to find my way in life, and yeah, certainly blessed to live here in America, and grew up in California largely, and then moved to the Boise, Idaho area,
Yes. Yes.
and been a lifelong fan of how we organize ourselves, which is really what politics is. That's simplest definition of how we organize ourselves, right? And with that, I've been an entrepreneur and a businessman, and I've spent a lot of time traveling the country, traveling the world, and I'm fascinated by people. And you mentioned in the beginning of the show, you talked about a divide here in America.
Yes.
We are not as divided as people think, but
Yes.
there is a massive attempt to divide us.
Yes.
That's the goal. And people ask like why or what's happening. We are in a worldwide conflict. America happens to be the strongest country in the world, and bringing us down and dividing us allows our enemies to take control over everything.
Yes.
And when you talk about who our enemies are the people that want to control us. And by that, really, if you think about what America stood for, America was about the individual and about liberty. And that does not work well with people who want to be tyrants and people who want to make decisions for us. And so for kind of eternity, there's been this battle between the central planners, the people that want to control all authority to themselves, and they think they know better than all of us as individuals. They want to control us. And the truth is that is anti-God, because God wants us to have the liberty that his idea, it's man idea. And he wants to make sure that's what we're able to pursue, and the central planners are those that want to oppose that. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. So, so you believe, so of course, so you believe that the U.S. is not necessarily, America is not divided, but there are those who are seeking to divide us. And you're saying that we are built, the foundation of this country is based on individualism and liberty. But so now tell me, how does your organization and how do you go about it? What do you think can bring about that? And what do you think is happening today in terms of the politics of our country? And what will be able to bring that, bridge that, or bring about that liberty and that individualism?
Yeah, well, so, Charlie, who, I still can't believe, and we're still all in shock, was assassinated, was
Yes.
the founder of Turning Point USA. And his vision was to really educate people on that idea of liberty. And he started educating the youth and educating young people who were being told that they were victims, being told that life was unfair, being told all kinds of nonsense that again is intended to fan the flames of envy and jealousy and make people victims, all that, because you can control people who don't have strength and power. You can control people who don't believe in sovereignty. You can control nations if you divide and fracture them. And that's what we've seen happening just categorically around the world. And again, America was unique in its founding because it was founded on that principle of we the people. And that's what's been attacked and fractured for so long. But when you have conversations like we're having now with people who you might disagree with, you find most of the time that you're actually closer than you think, rather than as far apart as they're making it seem in the media and all of the kind of ethos that you see in the world. We are not as divided. But Charlie was an advocate of us having those conversations and having free speech and being able to talk about these things.
Yes, and Ricardo is just joining us. And those of us who are just joining us, and we're speaking with Bryce Eddy. Bryce Eddy is the former president of Turning Point USA, and was also
Yeah, let me. Yeah, let me correct that. I sat on one of Charlie's boards. I was the board president of one of the four organizations, but I just want to make sure that that's clear. Charlie was the leader and founder of the organization, and Charlie was a one of one. There was nobody like Charlie before, and I don't think there'll ever be someone like Charlie after.
So what kind of void do you think he's left within your organization and within, how do you go? Yeah, that's the first question. And where do you go from here?
Yeah, so although Charlie was Turning Point and Turning Point was Charlie, it was so much more than that at the same time. And the organization is filled with a group of incredibly hard workers that delivered results. For example, Donald Trump really outsourced the ground here in the battle. And Charlie worked incredibly hard to get what we call the low propensity voters out to the polls. And that made the difference for Trump in this election. And we deployed thousands of people around the country in those states to go to the voters that would vote for Donald Trump as a candidate, but maybe would have stayed home on the couch or not registered otherwise. And Charlie made sure that those people got out to vote. And that's what this election was about, is who got out there and actually voted.
And I have a question.
many people have a negative view of turning points. There are many people who have a negative view of turning points, and even Kurt himself that he said that many unfortunate things were said during the time of when we needed compassion and sympathy. But as I will talk about the issue of bridging a divided nation. Or you say we're not divided. However, what is in terms you talk about bringing people together through biblical principles, love, truth, justice, and so on. But how do these principles translate into a pluralistic society where people are of many faiths or no faith at all? How do we achieve that? And because some see religion as a dividing line rather than a bridge. How do you ensure your message doesn't alienate but invite? And why? And the second question: Why do you what do you think? Why do you think some people have such a negative or misunderstand your message and the organization?
Well, I mean, that's all intentional. Discrediting Turning Point by misquoting Charlie or mischaracterizing his points on things. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. I mean, there is really some horrible and intentional mischaracterizing of Charlie's positions on things. And people did that because they are liars that want to destroy or discredit was such a powerful organization and will remain a very powerful organization. But all of that, I mean, those are people that are truly liars and manipulating people out there for their own ends, because it's frightening what has happened in our culture just in the last few years because of Charlie's impact. They are terrified of the fact that now you're watching high school kids coming up and being more conservative than they ever have been, adhering more to traditional values. The left went so far when they talked about men could get pregnant and all kinds of absurdities. They went way too far, and so now the young kids have had that turning point, pun intended, and started to look at that nonsense and wholesale reject it. You asked about pluralistic societies, though. In every society, in every country, in every culture, there will be a religious ideology that reigns supreme. You really cannot deny that. And for hundreds of years now at this point, in America, it was Christianity. And in the West at large, it was Christianity. And our founding fathers knew that that was important. So Christianity and its moral foundation was what allowed other religions, and it's what allowed a pluralistic society. You do not have that in any other culture without Christianity at its base, because Christianity isn't a top-down religion.
Hey. Yeah, lost Charlie. I'm sorry, Bryce. We have lost Bryce. Are you back? He made an interesting point in terms of your audio is not clear, by the way. My audio? Yeah, it's not clear at all.
Okay, all right. I think I'm back.
Yeah. Okay.
How do I say now?
Okay. All right. Perfect. Yeah. So you were talking about so Turning Point. Yeah. It's me. So one of the things because I did not know much about Turning Point. I mean, I didn't know much about Charlie Kirk. I learned about his death during. Can you hear me? You can, right? I learned about his death.
Yeah, I got you.
I learned about him in a meeting. I have a conference call with my team, and that's how I learned. And then I looked him up to see who he was. So anything that I know about Charlie Kirk was just recent. Everything was recent, which is quite unique considering that he had so many following and he was so influential. But I realized that one of the things is he was very influential to a lot of younger people within the college sphere, but also he was really trying to get out the vote. One of the most important thing impactful is getting out the vote with people who would not necessarily vote, but that I wasn't sure. Did he also try to get out the vote for those people who probably could be a liberal or independent view? It's just the idea of getting out there and voting and making sure that their voice is heard. Did they all do? Is that something that he believed in pushing as well?
No, I mean, he believed in everybody having a voice, but no, we certainly weren't pushing for the other side to get out there and vote. And partly because there's a massive disconnect between what are considered the Democrats of today and the Republicans. And by the way, I mean, both parties have failed us. But I will tell you one thing, and this ruffles a lot of feathers. The modern Democrat Party platform is incongruent with the Christian faith. At every level, what the Democrats believe, it is anti-Bible. It is anti-Christ. And that ruffles the feathers of traditional Democrats who envision what JFK had and what the party used to be like. But they moved the Overton window so far left that just on the basis of principle, you cannot be a Democrat. And I challenge my Democrat friends and people who have held those views traditionally to go through and think about what they stand for these days, because it is a pro-death, anti-family, anti-enterprise, anti-liberty belief system. And so, of course, we aren't going to be advocating for people who don't even really know why they should vote, or even America was found. We certainly don't want them to be running out and voting. Now, at the same time, what Charlie advocated is learn these things and learn why America was founded and learn why liberty is important. Then go out and vote.
Okay, perfect. One of the things I heard you say was about man getting pregnant. I've never heard of that before, but I'm not on social a lot. I've been on there a lot lately because I want to know what's going on there and what's going on in the world. But when you said that, I was like quite interesting, because if I hear anyone say that, I think that's just ludicrous and that's ridiculous. If anyone would say that, if that's something that they're pushing. It's so unique.
I wanted to make the point, and I know, Ricardo, you're going somewhere with the conversation, but earlier Bryce was speaking about in every culture there's a religion or a religious or an ideological or philosophy that runs supreme, a religious philosophy that runs supreme. And in America, it is Christianity. Because Christianity was founded on those principles. So you and we had interrupted in that. But the questions that you made, because what I'm saying to you is that how do these principles translate into the society where people of many faiths or no faith at all? How do we reconcile it? How do we reconcile this? Because some see religion as a dividing line rather than a bridge. That is why we have the conversation about abortion and so on and so forth. That is why we have the conversations about sexuality and so on and so forth. But so my question is, how do you ensure your message doesn't alienate but invite?
Well, I mean, some of the Christian principles and some of the things that our country is founded on is going to be alienating. And that's why there are things that are incompatible with Western culture. For instance, right now we have a massive rising tide of Islam in certain communities around the world. And you are having things within that culture that should not be allowed. For example, the mutilation of young girls sexually should not be something that is allowed here in America, but it is a religious principle in part of Islam. You cannot allow that, and so there are things that, as a Christian culture, meaning a base foundational culture, which is where we build our laws, where we get our morality, there are things that you cannot accept. Our founding fathers did not ever imagine us to have no moral code. They did not imagine us to have a moral code that went against our liberty, went against the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They did not imagine a world that we would just allow any idea and anything to grow and proliferate. there has to be standards. We started to abandon those Christian standards here in America over the last several decades and go in favor of a secular humanism that's still a religious ideology. And with that, you have the collapse of society.
Are you there? Can you hear me?
I lost you.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was talking to you.
Ronaldo, you're muted.
Yes. Do you have a follow-up question to that, Ricardo?
I do have a follow-up question because you talk about the founding principle of America. Okay, and there has always been a drive in terms of separating state and church. How is it that there is a separation between state and church, but it seems as if your organization and yourself is focused on utilizing the religion as a way back, but yet still within the politics, within the foundation, there is a separation of state and church.
How do you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's not appear in our founding documents.
Muslims will disagree with you that their religion is about the mutualization of girls. Of course, I'm in Philadelphia, and there are a lot of Muslims here, and I don't think that is something that they promote. Maybe the radicalist Muslims or the most what I've said is that people have taken the most radical aspect of something when they want to push back against it. But and then again, I think it is unfair to say that to have no faith is to not have a moral code. There are those who would argue against that. So how do you speak to all of this?
Well, first, I would challenge anyone on that, and we could spend hours talking about where we get our moral code, and why it needs to be separate from our own just personal decisions or collective decisions, because there have been plenty of cultures that collectively decide to do great evil. There has to be a moral code imprinted on us from a creator. And I think that that's very clear, and that's why I'm a Christian. There is no society that is more free than a Christian society, and that includes a secular humanist society, and we can support that when you look at it all around the world. The oppression that goes against Christians in supposed secular societies where they have no religion, there is some of the most egregious attacks against Christians. Oh, you talked about how do we allow, or how do we have a pluralistic society that functions? I think the reason that only a Christian society can allow that is because we are, like I said a little bit earlier, and I'm not sure if they got cut off, but Christianity is a ground up religion. You know, it's something that God puts on our heart to make that decision for Christ. It's not a top down style of religion where things like Islam and others tend to be. And I think that that's a big difference, and it allows freedom and liberty here in America like nowhere else.
Yeah, because it takes me back to one thing about Christianity, and I think it's, for me, it's all about the idea of love, because that's Christianity. Because the idea of Christianity is Jesus. If you believe in Christianity, then the idea behind Christianity is Jesus, which is love. He gave his life for us, and the idea behind that is love. So you write down all of everything and the sepulchre and the sacrifices that they used to do. So that's one thing I feel as though is getting lost in some of the message, that how do we ensure that we is not losing that message of turning point in bringing together and bridging divide through the message of love, because I just ultimately feel as though that's something that's getting lost, that we need to really remember. The woman at the well, the Jezebel, she was a Jezebel. She wasn't living the life that Jesus wants, or Christianity, or not Christianity, but the Judaism that time. But he said, cast the first stone. So we are going to make sure that we invite this Jezebel and try to save her. And that's something that I feel like we need to start to embrace as well.
Yeah, sure. And I think I think Charlie exemplified that. If you watch him on his campus tours, I mean, he treated people with a kindness that was, very Christ-like, even when there was pretty heated disagreements. And, of course, Charlie wasn't perfect, and none of us are, but you saw him take that approach, and he was very encouraging of people, sharing their point of view and having a dialogue with them. But at the same time, love is not only the only thing, and sometimes that gets misconstrued, because love sometimes is justice. Love sometimes is tough. Love sometimes is speaking the truth where it might offend people. I mentioned earlier the idea here in America that was bubbling up among the left is that we can decide whatever gender we want to be, and for you to say that men can't get pregnant here in this culture, you could be canceled about that. You could be ostracized. You could be attacked in your businesses if you did not affirm children taking puberty blockers and deciding that they were another gender. I mean, that was the kind of nonsense that was really being driven aggressively here in this culture, and now you've seen that change. There has been a vibe shift, and it could not have come any better than through Charlie's message and the things that he was speaking on college campuses.
Yeah, perfect. I see what you're saying. I mean, one of the things that I do believe is that, listen, I like to tell people that I'm somewhat liberal, but I'm somewhat conservative. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I believe that I don't believe in puberty, whatever. If you're born a man, you're a man. If you're born a girl, If you play a man sport, play a man sport. If anyone push any other idea, I think that they're crazy. I think it's a crazy person to push that idea. I don't know where they're from, where they're coming from with that. But those, you're right, are just out there ideas that maybe they have some mental issues there and it needs to be looked at. So if they're pushing that, I do believe. But I do believe that right now, for example, right now we have our president, and he's doing a great job in some areas. But I think you really need to look at, because for me, love is not vengeance. And I feel like some of the ideas behind it is going after someone does not exemplify Christian principle of love. You can't say I hate someone or I don't love them, because then that's an antithesis and anti. And I don't think Turning Point is pushing that, because I know Charlie Kirk is a Christian.
So yes,
and I see that the vengeance and I don't love you argument is being pushed. How do we or talk negatively about someone? And I know you talk about tough love, but at the same time, we still have to remember that love also doesn't kill someone or put someone down, but also push them up in order to kill.
Follow up with where you're going with this, because, and I think Bryce mentioned this, because I did say that he's associated with Turning Points, and a name that evokes a lot of strong reactions, and some say it stands for conservative activism. Now, how do you reconcile your faith-driven call for unity with political reality that thrive on division, as against which promotes love? Because and then Ricardo mentioned the point about Donald Trump. When leaders like Donald Trump cast blame and feed a culture of resentment, how do you, as a believer in reconciliation, navigate that tension? How do you hold people accountable, leaders accountable? Do you see a way for America's moral compass to point true north again, or without requiring everyone to believe the same? So those are compact. One, how do you reconcile your faith-driven call for unity with political reality that thrive on division, that promote love? Two, when leaders like Donald Trump cast blame and feed a culture of resentment, how do you, as a believer in reconciliation, navigate that tension and hold them accountable as a Christian yourself? And thirdly, do you see a way for America's moral compass to point true north again without requiring everyone to believe the same? So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I'll start with that last one. What we created was a generational problem that requires a generational solution. We in America largely abandoned the Christian faith. We ran away from our glorious founding on those Christian principles that I talked about earlier, and we need to come back to that. And what we are seeing right now is the young generation that's coming up is more Christian and more conservative than in years past. And we need a revival. And Charlie prayed for it. And his assassination certainly had a massive effect on that. And I have talked daily with people who were not very aware of him, really did not take their faith seriously, that their eyes were opened after his death, and they've watched hours and hours of his presentations and even his evangelical sharing of the good news of Christ. So I think that is how we solve these problems, is by having a new moral group of young people coming up and choosing a better way for the future. In terms of what Donald Trump is doing, I think that there are people who have destroyed this country, who have defrauded us, who have stolen money out of our treasury, who have tried to accumulate power to themselves and have destroyed families, destroyed cultures. And I think that many of them need to answer for those crimes. Now, bringing justice to those people can be done in a good way or being done in a vengeful way. And I sympathize with Donald Trump and some of the aggressive feelings he must have for those people that tried to put him away for 700 years and invented new legal standards and changed laws simply to go after him and weaponized our legal system against him, which is undoubtedly what happened, because we've seen much of that fall apart once it was kind of scrutinized, and he's beaten most of those things that they brought against him. And it were people that were illegally doing that. And I think that we certainly need to have them face justice. There is a point at which we can forgive those folks, but forgiving them does not mean absolving them of their crimes. And that is something that I think a Christian has to walk a tightrope very carefully and not be joyful in having people who deserve to go down. But there's people that need to be prosecuted and arrested. I think about.
Remember what God said: "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord. You cannot be the king and the justice and it's his. I live a life of, I believe the Bible, I read it, and I feel as though a lot of times we are not living it, and we say we are, and we have to remember that. And we also have to be compassionate. I do believe that fine, if I feel as though they were doing their job and they were directed, and if that's the case, remember, if he's a president and he's doing something and the Supreme Court said that he is okay, if he's doing a job based on if he's a president, he could do it. So then these people think that they're doing their job, but at the same time, we can't say that we are gods and vengeance is mine, says the Lord, and then we are exacting his vengeance because it's for him.
Well, wait, vengeance and justice are two different things, okay? And being and delivering justice to people that violated the laws of the United States is not wrong. You can and you can bring justice into a culture without it being vengeance. And oh, by the way, God says vengeance is mine, right? But again, vengeance is an attitude. But God places the authority. He gave the authority to kings. He gives the authority to presidents. I mean, that's a biblical principle. And so there is a call for those that administer justice to administer justice. If there is an evil wickedness in people's hearts who are seeking vengeance, and there's people that are in this political party of mine, and there are people who are in the conservative space that want to see people hung from trees because they're so angry, that is not appropriate. But I still sympathize with their feelings, and I understand, why some of the people who were arrested for taking a tour of the Capitol building on J6, who thought they were invited in by the police. And I know people that all they did was look inside. Siaka Massaquoi, who's on my show every other week, took one step in the building, took a video, was told by the police to leave. He walked out, and he was arrested by 4 FBI agents, on his way home in the airport.
Wait, you did not say that. I was watching.
Hold on a second. We are about to wrap up the show.
We only have about 2 minutes.
That cannot be said like that.
I know, and we have to follow up. Ricardo, hold on a second. Ricardo, hold on a second. You just said something. So you support Donald Trump's actions against the Attorney General of New York, and you're against Donald Trump's action against many people who have gone after him on January 6th. So, for example, John Anthony Castro, who was running for president, but was suing him. He was a Republican, was suing him for violating Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. He's a Republican. Of course, there are Trump University. There are people who sue them regarding Trump University. There are people who, take, for example, the Stormy Daniel. You're saying that within the systems, and then you're saying that all of those, you support what Donald Trump is doing in relation to people who believe that they are holding him accountable for all these things and other things. You're saying that the kind of justice that he's meting out to people is justifiable.
Well, the things that we're talking about right now, like you just mentioned, Letitia James.
They're talking about coming out justice. So you're saying you support
Letitia James engaged in a very similar fraud that she tried to put Trump away in prison for, I think there's some poetic justice there that was revealed, that she was engaging in something that she again tried to hold him criminally liable for when there was no victim, when the